Now picture this. The year is 1025 CE. In the vast blue stretch of the Indian Ocean, a colossal fleet of wooden ships with curved prows cuts through the waters, carrying not just warriors, but war elephants, archers, and ambition. These ships are unlike anything Southeast Asia has seen before. They are part of a meticulously planned naval expedition, not by some far-off European kingdom, but by an Indian empire most people outside India have never even heard of, the Chola dynasty. Their mission? To cross the Bay of Bengal and launch a full-scale naval attack on the powerful Srivijaya Empire in present-day Indonesia and Malaysia. Not for colonization, but to protect Indian trade routes, assert dominance, and send a message. India isn't just a land power, it's a maritime force to be feared. This wasn't a one-off adventure. The Cholas had built a professional navy centuries before most European nations even knew what a navy was. Yet you won't find this story in many world history books. It's not taught in most Indian schools either. Why? Because when colonial historians rewrote India's past, they framed it as a land of sages and farmers, not shipbuilders and naval conquerors. But that's about to change. In this episode of History and Beyond, we'll uncover the awe-inspiring story of how a Tamil empire from southern India became the first Indian power to establish a blue water navy, one that didn't just guard the coastline but sailed across oceans, took on kingdoms, and left its mark on lands thousands of miles away. This is the story of India's first real naval army, a story of strategic brilliance, bold leadership, and maritime legacy. A story that proves India's history isn't just landlocked, it's ocean deep. So stay with us as we set sail on this forgotten voyage through time. Long before Europe's great naval powers like Spain and England had even formed, the Cholas were already laying the foundations of a maritime empire. And it wasn't by accident, it was by design. Under Rajendra Chola and later his son Rajendra Chola I, the Cholas began investing heavily in a naval force that would go far beyond simple coastal patrols. They envisioned a blue water navy, a force capable of long-range expeditions, amphibious assaults, and protecting trade routes far from home. The Chola shipyards were marvels of their time. Located in ports like Kavaripattanam, Nagapattinam, and Arikamedu, these yards constructed large, sail-powered wooden vessels using Indian teak, a hardwood prized for its strength and water resistance. Ships were built with broad hulls for stability, strong keels for deep-sea travel, and deck layouts that could transport not only men and weapons, but even war elephants. Some vessels were used purely for warfare, while others served as cargo ships, supply carriers, and floating garrisons. But it wasn't just about building ships. The Cholas developed a naval doctrine. They trained sailors, archers, and marines to operate in coordinated formations. Their naval forces could execute complex maneuvers at sea, launch amphibious landings, and raid coastal fortifications with precision. We even have references to multi-tiered naval hierarchies, suggesting a sophisticated command structure. This wasn't a ragtag militia, it was a state-sponsored, battle-tested navy. What's equally impressive is how the Cholas integrated their navy with their empire's economic engine. They knew maritime strength wasn't just about war, it was about controlling trade. The Indian Ocean trade routes were the lifeblood of commerce, linking India with China, Arabia, and Southeast Asia. By building a strong naval force, the Cholas could protect Indian merchants, extract tribute from foreign ports, and ensure South Indian goods, like spices, textiles, and precious stones, flowed outward while wealth flowed inward. And their maritime strength was not just defensive. The Chola kings saw the navy as a tool of expansion, diplomacy, and domination. Rajendra Chola would inherit this mighty fleet from his father, and he wouldn't let it sit idle. In the next section, we'll witness how Rajendra Chola launched one of the boldest military campaigns in Asian history, a naval expedition that would shake the powerful Srivijaya Empire and establish Indian supremacy far beyond its shores. In the annals of world history, few naval expeditions from the ancient or medieval world rival the sheer scale and ambition of what Rajendra Chola accomplished in the year 1025 CE. This wasn't just a military campaign, it was a geopolitical statement, a powerful declaration that India was not a passive landmass waiting to be discovered. It was a force that could sail across oceans, dictate terms to other empires, and leave its mark on foreign shores. Rajendra Chola had inherited more than just a fleet. He inherited a vision, and he would use his navy not just for defense but for strategic projection of Indian power. His target? The Srivijaya Empire, a sprawling maritime kingdom that dominated trade routes in present-day Indonesia, Malaysia, and southern Thailand. Srivijaya had grown rich and powerful by controlling the choke points of Southeast Asian maritime commerce, including the crucial Strait of Malacca. But something had changed. South Indian merchants were facing increasing harassment at Srivijaya ports. Tribute wasn't being paid. Trade disruptions were mounting. Rajendra saw this not just as an insult, but a threat to Chola sovereignty over the seas. The decision was made. India would strike back, not overland but by sea. The campaign that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Rajendra dispatched a massive fleet, reportedly including hundreds of ships. These weren't just small boats hugging the coast, they were fully equipped warships capable of traversing open seas, carrying soldiers, cavalry, elephants, and supplies across vast distances. The fleet set sail across the Bay of Bengal, navigating treacherous waters with monsoon winds and star-based navigation techniques passed down for generations. What followed was a series of coordinated attacks on key Srivijayan ports: Kedah, Tambralinga, Malayur, and even Palembang, the heart of the Srivijaya Empire. The Chola Navy overwhelmed these targets, sacked cities, seized control of trading hubs, and brought Srivijaya to its knees. Rajendra's forces didn't colonize the region. They didn't need to. The message had been sent: India would not be denied access to the global maritime economy. This expedition is remarkable not just for its military success, but for its logistical brilliance. Managing food, water, discipline, morale, and coordination across such distances in the 11th century was an incredible feat. And it wasn't just a raid. The Cholas secured maritime supremacy, re-established safe trade routes, and elevated Indian prestige across the region. Even the Chinese Song dynasty took notice. Records show that soon after the expedition, Rajendra Chola sent a formal embassy to China and received recognition from the imperial court, a testament to how far the ripples of this campaign spread. In the next section, we'll break down exactly what made the Chola Navy so powerful, how it was organized, how it maintained dominance, and why it became a model of maritime strength unmatched in the Indian subcontinent for centuries. So what exactly made the Chola Navy such a formidable force in the medieval world? How did an empire based in southern India build and sustain a maritime war machine capable of sailing thousands of kilometers, conquering coastal cities, and commanding respect from other empires? To understand this, we need to look beyond the ships and into the deep structure of the Chola maritime system. Because this was not just a fleet, it was a carefully orchestrated naval ecosystem supported by technology, training, administration, and economy. At the heart of the Chola Navy was a clear command hierarchy. Inscriptions and copper plate grants mention naval titles like Kadramkonda Cholan, the conqueror of Kedah, and Navy Commander of the Sea Forces, indicating distinct roles within a professional structure. There were admirals, fleet captains, marines, support officers, and even specialized roles like shipwrights, cartographers, and supply managers. This was not just a spontaneous assembly of ships, it was a naval institution backed by a central command, logistics networks, and imperial funding. The ships themselves were diverse and purpose-built. Large warships carried archers, infantry, and even elephants for psychological impact during amphibious assaults. Smaller, faster vessels served as scouts or message carriers. Merchant convoys moved with naval escorts to protect trade routes, and supply ships carried rations, weapons, and reinforcements, ensuring Chola naval expeditions could last months, not just days. Chola ports like Nagapattinam, Pumpuhar, and Kavaripattinam weren't just harbors, they were naval hubs. These cities had shipyards for construction and repair, garrisons to house marines, and bustling merchant quarters that tied the military to the economy. The Navy wasn't a standalone entity. It was deeply integrated with trade guilds, merchant families, and religious institutions. Some temples even financed ship construction, viewing it as dharmic service to protect the realm and prosperity. The Cholas also excelled at maritime diplomacy. Their navy was both a sword and a scepter. It could threaten and negotiate. Rajendra Chola sent emissaries to China after his Southeast Asian expedition, and evidence shows the Cholas were recognized by the Chinese court as a major naval power. Inscriptions also mention gifts, tributes, and trade agreements with kingdoms across the Bay of Bengal and beyond. And let's not forget, the Chola Navy wasn't just about domination, it was also about stability. By securing sea lanes, it allowed Tamil merchants to flourish. South Indian goods like spices, textiles, ivory, and jewelry could reach markets in Arabia, Africa, and East Asia. In return, the wealth poured into the empire funded grand temples, irrigation systems, and urban development. The Chola state, in many ways, was a maritime empire powered by a war-ready economy. What's even more impressive is that all of this happened 1,000 years ago, without modern compasses, engines, or GPS. The Chola Navy relied on astronomical navigation, seasonal wind cycles, and centuries of indigenous maritime knowledge passed down through coastal fishing and trading communities. This wasn't just a navy, it was a civilization on water, and for over a century it ruled the waves of the Indian Ocean unchallenged. In the next section, we'll look at how the Chola naval legacy spread far beyond India, leaving its imprint across Southeast Asia in temples, language, and trade, and influencing regional politics long after the ships returned home. When Rajendra Chola's mighty fleet returned home after its stunning campaign against the Srivijaya Empire, it didn't leave a vacuum behind. It left a legacy. The Chola Navy didn't just conquer ports and sink ships. It reshaped the very fabric of Southeast Asia, altering the region's cultural, political, and economic dynamics in ways that can still be traced a millennium later. In places like Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, and southern Thailand, the impact of the Cholas was more than military. It was cultural and civilizational. Tamil traders, temple architects, language, and religious influences followed the wake of the fleet. The Cholas didn't establish colonies, but they established presence, a subtle but powerful form of soft power that outlived their military campaigns. Take, for instance, the architecture. Ancient temples across Southeast Asia, from Indonesia's Prambanan to regions of central Malaysia, show clear signs of Dravidian influence in their spires, carvings, and layout. Tamil-style sculptures of Shiva and Vishnu, inscriptions in Old Tamil script, and adaptations of Indian epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata became embedded in local art and folklore. Trade routes once dominated by Srivijaya were now open to South Indian merchants, who brought with them Tamil language, Hindu-Buddhist practices, and social customs. Over time, a fusion culture emerged, blending local Southeast Asian traditions with imported Indian ideas. This created a rich hybrid civilization, still visible in languages like Malay, which borrowed heavily from Tamil and Sanskrit. Even the term Kolamandalam, meaning realm of the Cholas, lives on in a distorted but recognizable form in the name of India's Coromandel coast, the very shore from which this maritime influence was launched. Politically, the Chola expedition had shattered the myth of Srivijaya's invincibility. The once dominant maritime empire never fully recovered. Though it would continue to exist in some form, its grip over Southeast Asian trade weakened considerably, giving rise to new regional powers like the Khmer Empire in Cambodia, who themselves adopted elements of Indian, especially Tamil, culture in temple building and governance. And let's not forget religion. Hinduism and Buddhism, both carried and adapted by Tamil scholars and traders, took deep root in these regions. It wasn't forced conversion, it was cultural exchange, sustained by shared rituals, texts, and temple-building techniques. The Chola impact wasn't short-lived. It wasn't just about battles. It was about networks of influence that endured for generations. Long after the last Chola warship returned to Tamil shores, their spiritual, economic, and artistic legacy continued to sail across the minds and memories of Southeast Asia. And this is perhaps the most underrated achievement of the Chola Navy. It didn't just conquer land, it won hearts, minds, and markets, leaving a civilizational footprint that even modern borders couldn't erase. In the next and final section, we'll explore why this glorious maritime history was forgotten for so long, how colonial narratives erased India's oceanic past, and why rediscovering the Chola Navy matters now more than ever in our modern world. If you're wondering why you've never heard of the Chola Navy, the most advanced maritime force in India's ancient history, you're not alone. Despite its achievements, this legacy is curiously absent from global discourse, and even in Indian classrooms, it's reduced to a passing mention. This silence is not accidental. It's the result of centuries of colonial narrative control. where the idea of India as a weak, landlocked civilization served British imperial interests. You see, when the British arrived in India, they didn't just seize land and resources, they seized the story of India. They crafted a version of history that painted India as a chaotic, passive land in need of Western order and maritime protection. So, stories of ancient Indian naval supremacy, like that of the Cholas, were quietly buried. Instead, textbooks focused on Vasco da Gama's discovery of India, as if Indians had never crossed the seas or commanded fleets before. But history tells a different story. Long before the British built their first dockyard in Bombay, India had a thriving oceanic culture, a network of seafarers, merchants, and warriors who not only sailed but ruled the seas. The Cholas were proof that India was not just a receiver of outside influence, but a transmitter of civilization. And this isn't just about pride, it's about perspective. When we know that an Indian empire once projected power across the Bay of Bengal, engaged in diplomatic missions to China, and reshaped the politics of Southeast Asia, we begin to reframe India's place in global history. We begin to see it not as a victim of colonialism, but as a player on the world stage long before Europe's rise. Today, as India once again invests in building a powerful navy and asserts itself on the global maritime map, there's a deeper story unfolding. It's not just about security or commerce. It's about reclaiming a forgotten identity. 1,000 years ago, the Cholas proved that Indian civilization could reach across oceans, not with greed or genocide, but with ideas, culture, and trade. Rediscovering the Chola naval empire matters because it teaches us that the sea was never a boundary for India. It was a bridge. It reminds us that global influence is not new for South Asia. It's ancient. And it challenges every young viewer to ask, what other legacies have been hidden from us? What other stories lie beneath the surface? This is why we do what we do on History and Beyond. Because these aren't just old tales, they're blueprints for the future. So if this episode opened your eyes to a part of Indian history you never knew existed, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment below. Tell us, did you know India once ruled the seas? And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth. Because rewriting history isn't about changing the past, it's about claiming the truth.